here on LinkedIn. Now, I am live streaming through StreamYard to LinkedIn. So we have had lots of people register for this event, and Hayley and I are super excited about it. We're going to get started in just a moment. As you are hopefully coming in live, go ahead and put some comments in the comment section. Just know that if we don't see your comment, it might be because I'm streaming through StreamYard, and Hayley and I will get to those comments after. But definitely, if you're here live through the presentation, participate because we love interaction. All right, so we are just going to jump right in. Hello, everybody. I am Bonnie Giller. I am a registered dietitian. I'm a certified intuitive eating counselor and a certified diabetes care and education specialist. All that to mean I help people care for their health and eat with confidence and trust without any obsession, without restriction, without fear, whether you are on GLP-1s or not, because we do know GLP-1s are all the craze right now. I'm in practice 38 years, just a little bit of an intro for me. And my work is rooted in a weight neutral, trust-centered approach to food and to health. What that means is I help people rebuild trust with their food, with their body, with their eating, instead of relying on control, restriction, lots of rules, and constant self-monitoring. What I see over and over again is that when stress comes into play, and I think basically we all have stress of some sorts in our life. Hayley's going to dive into all that kind of stress. That trust tends to disappear. And what happens is people end up blaming themselves when things are not going their way, or they make certain decisions that they didn't expect themselves to make, when really what's happening is a nervous system response. And so today we are talking about something that I believe impacts every single one of us, and that is stress. Now, just to say, this stress is not, oh, it's been a busy day. I think, again, we all tend to have busy days, but what we're talking about is when stress hijacks your brain. That's Hayley's terminology. She'll tell us exactly what that means. So if you've ever said to yourself, I know what to do, I just don't do it when I'm stressed. By the way, I have heard that from a lot of women who I have spoken to. I know that you're not alone, and that's exactly why I have invited Dr. Hayley Nelson to join us here today. So Hayley, I'm just so glad that you're here. Can you please just introduce yourself to our audience?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you. Bonnie and I met at a networking event, and we just hit it off really well. And I loved that she wanted to understand more about the brain so that she can, relay that information to her clients to help them overcome some of those obstacles. So I was super excited that she invited me to do this today. And we're going to talk a little bit about something else that's coming up in a few weeks as well. But first, let me tell you a little bit about myself in case you don't know who I am. I'm Dr. Hayley Nelson. I am a neuroscientist and full-time psychology professor in the Philadelphia area. And I also founded the Academy of Cognitive and Behavioral Neuroscience, where I'm really passionate about making neuroscience approachable. My work really focuses, both in the classroom as well as through the academy, on educating and also helping people really understand how their brains actually function. And a lot of people really want to understand more about how it functions under stress because, my goodness, I think everybody's going through some stress right now. So a little bit more about me, my background. I do have my PhD in psychological and brain sciences from Johns Hopkins University. And I've spent over 20 years doing research with the University of Pennsylvania and the National Institutes of Health, also at Johns Hopkins, and about 20 years now of teaching in the classroom as well as through the academy. And I really focus, my dissertation work was on motivated behaviors, and specifically more recently about how stress can affect these behaviors. So what I love most about bringing this into discussion is that a lot of people think that stress is really all about mindset or discipline, and they start feeling guilty when they make bad choices or do bad habits. And really, I want to really kind of dive into this idea that it is actually very neurological. And so you can take some of that guilt off of you, off of yourself, and really understand what's going on in the brain and the body, and then so that you can actually make change that lasts.
Yeah, I really, really love that. It's so important because people do feel guilty about it, right? People are capable, they're very responsible, they are successful in so many areas of life, they're so disciplined, but all of a sudden stress hits and things change, right? So there's this disconnect. And what I see a lot is eating patterns change, for example, sleep changes, their level of patience changes, right? Maybe they have more cravings of food. And instead of trying to step back and understand, it's like, well, what is wrong with me? And then the self-criticism happens and such. So from a neuroscience perspective, Hayley, can you tell us what's actually happening in the brain when someone feels like they're reacting instead of choosing intentionally when they're stressed? What is actually happening in the brain?
Yeah, I get that all the time. And first, I just want to make sure, because I think, and myself included, we use this term stress, not always necessarily correctly. So stress is, think of it as an active process. So we have stressors in our environment. These are things that sometimes we have control over and sometimes we don't, right? We don't have control over the weather. We don't have control over, other people's behaviors and things like that. But we do have, or if we don't, we can learn how to have more control over our own process, our own thinking patterns, things like that. So when we're talking about stress, I think what a lot of people are talking about is their stress reaction. So how do you actually react to the stressors in your life? And there's two ways in which your brain and your body react to these stressors. First, there's the initial emergency fight or flight response, right? That, a lot of people can go into, especially with some kind of major life change or a catastrophic event, right? But not all stress is like that. Sometimes, I'm a mother with 2 young kids who I got to get to school, and I have all their sports schedules, and then I also work, and all of these things that builds up as well. And so that could be considered more of a chronic stressor. And the way that your brain processes these things are also different. So let's first talk about more of that emergency fight or flight response. So when we have this perception of a threat, whether it's an actual threat or not, all that really matters is our perception of it. So if we perceive a threat in our environment, our brain is going to go into survival mode. Think back to caveman times, right? If you have a saber-toothed tiger charging for you, you need to figure out how to make your resources available so that you can either escape that situation or fight off that tiger, right? So your brain automatically puts you into this survival mode. And it does this because there's an area in your brain known as your amygdala, and it's very deep in the center of your brain, and that becomes more active, and it's responsible for detecting this threat and leading to the next series of events that's going to control the rest of your body, putting you into that sympathetic activated nervous system to engage in that fight or flight response. Now, another area of the brain that is responsible for our executive functioning, our planning, our, making decisions, things like that, that's our prefrontal cortex right up here in the front. And that's really important for those events like future planning, decision-making. Now, because your amygdala is active in those times, that means your prefrontal cortex is less active. So when we are in that hypervigilant state, when that perception of a threat is near us, we're not using our prefrontal cortex. We're using our amygdala, which is really more emotion-based. It's more reflexive. You're less reflective, you're more reactive in those states. And the same thing happens. It's a different neural pathway. It's a different system that's enacted. It's called the HPA axis when you're engaged in these chronic stressful events. But at the end of the day, what's actually happening is you have less functioning of your prefrontal cortex and more activity in your amygdala, right? So whether it's that initial threat response that's activating your sympathetic nervous system or those long-term chronic stressors that's going to activate your HPA axis, the end result is going to be more reactivity, emotional reactivity, and things like that. So it's not a character flaw. It's not something that you're weak or you're not able to do it. It's actually a brain state. It's a biological mechanism that has been preserved through hundreds of millions of years of our evolution to protect us, to keep us safe, right? Wow. So it's not a character flaw. It's not a personality trait. It's actually biological. Right.
And if you're living in that chronically stressed state, it sounds like the amygdala is going to continue to be activated.
Yes. Yep.
longer term, right? And that's why we see what we see when someone's living in a chronically stressed state. I imagine in real life, certain things like they could be meal planning as much as they want, but all of a sudden now that goes out the window, right? And that's where, oh, what can I reach for that's going to give me quick energy in terms of food, right? Or they spit out something in words that they regret later. Did I really say that, right? And even impacting sleep. So that has to be impacting their sleep, right?
Absolutely. And
Oh,
your entire hormone profile, right? So with that chronic stress, you're going to have cortisol being released, right? That is coined the stress hormone. And it's actually a good thing that we have it. But if
mhm.
it goes unchecked and it continues to be released, this is where you can have actual, brain depletion, especially in areas like your hippocampus, for example, that's tied to learning and memory. And you're going to have a lot more long-term chronic stressors, and it's going to affect your cardiovascular system. I mean, it
Right.
really can wreak havoc on your entire body. So it is something that we really do want to, for anybody, not even necessarily for how we eat. I mean, that is a side effect, that's a symptom of, the stress reaction for many people.
Mhm.
And so identifying that as an issue that you want to correct, sometimes you really kind of have to pull back the layers to see what's really going on so that you can say, okay, let's regulate our nervous system. Let's see what's going on. Let's come up with different tools to be able to mitigate some of these negative consequences of stress.
Right. That's great. So it's not that, when people engage in these behaviors that don't support their health, it's not that they don't care about it,
Right.
but it's their brain prioritizing survival in
Yeah,
this period of time. Right. So
absolutely.
let's talk about this word willpower. I really dislike that word, at least in the work that I do. We never rely on willpower when it comes to food, but what what about willpower and managing stress, right? Like sometimes people say, I just need the willpower too, right? So why is that not the case? Like, why does that not work under stress?
So willpower is great, but under stress, it doesn't really work as well because, as I mentioned, we have that prefrontal cortex that isn't functioning optimally during times of stress, right? When we're in that stress reaction mode. So, because that system is less active during these stressful times, our willpower isn't really there. We're not making those decisions. We're not able to engage all of those types of executive functioning skills that we would need for willpower to be very, successful.
Mhm.
So, because all of those biological resources that we need for self control are actually diminished during this time, because we're trying to really conserve energy to, as we mentioned, being in that survival mode, right? So, that's why sometimes habits, especially coping habits, right? Good, bad, or ugly,
Mhm.
they feel stronger. They just become automatic. So it's those automatic behaviors. You reach for Ben and Jerry's, you reach for, the chocolate cake instead of going to the gym or instead of going for a walk, right? Because those are just some habits that have been ingrained in your nervous system
Right.
that are become automatic, and they become the first behavior that we end up making. Now, I do want to say though that willpower is very strong and you can help build it, right? So you don't have to feel stuck in those bad habits that you have, because we have something that our brains are beautiful at, which is called neuroplasticity. Our brains are very plastic, they're very moldable, and while we can develop these bad habits, that's neuroplasticity as well, right? So neuroplasticity can lead to bad habits, but now we can actually hone in that power and create the brain mechanisms and the neural connections that are going to actually foster adaptive responses instead of these maladaptive ones. So
Right.
through therapy, through coaching, through counseling, you can actually learn to strengthen your prefrontal cortex. So even during these times of stress, you can become more resilient. And because our brains are so plastic, you can develop these strategies to better cope with stressors in the present as well as in the future. And I'm going
Right.
to talk more about this in a webinar that we're going to have in a couple weeks. I'm going to go through some tried and true approaches to help mitigate some of these negative aspects of stress and really boost neuroplasticity to help us instead of allow us to continue on some of these bad habits that we might have developed over the years.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I love that because it's important for people to understand that we can change behaviors. We can change neural pathways in the brain, right? So
Mhm.
I think that's really important for people to understand what is happening in our brain. Like you say, I mean, in my world, it shows up a lot around stress eating, but there are so many other ways it shows up, which you will obviously, get into, right? And that's why I think this conversation matters just so much, because it's, stress hits us, and it's like we become so reactive, and then we start again, the self-criticism, and why did I do that, and I should quote unquote should know better, etc. So I just want to share that I appreciate your time today. And if whoever's watching, if you're here live or on the replay, if what we have been speaking about today resonates, and if you're like, oh my God, that explains so much, we are absolutely going deeper. Like Hayley said, we have a webinar coming up that we are co-hosting. We will have Hayley unpack all of this Wednesday, March 25th. And it's called When Stress Hijacks Your Brain, How to Work with It, Not Against It, and Take Back Control. We will put the link in the comments. I am unable to post the link here live on our screen, which I was hoping to do. That's thankfully to StreamYard. We'll need to think about that next time. But Hayley, do you want to break down exactly what you're going to be covering for a moment in that webinar that's coming up?
Absolutely. So I'm going to put my professor hat on during the webinar, and I'm going to have slides, an actual PowerPoint presentation to present, to really go through the science behind the stress response as well, in our bodies as well as in our brains, and really talk about how the brain responds to these types of stressors and why, it doesn't always feel like a choice. We're going to talk about, I'm going to show you where the amygdala is and the prefrontal cortex, look at those connections, actually understand the physiology behind it. And then the majority of the talk is actually almost like a workshop where we're going to go through some tried and true techniques and things that have worked and work with, it's in textbooks that it's worked. It's been empirically tested, but also through firsthand experience for myself, as well as other clients that I've worked with, to be able to understand from a more holistic approach of how we can help our bodies become more regulated, how we can learn how to engage that neuroplasticity to be able to allow us to come up with better coping mechanisms. And I promise there's no neuroscience degree required. That's kind of my go-to statement, is that I make neuroscience approachable, right? So come as you are, and you don't need to have any kind of degree. I break it down. And if you show up live to the webinar, and by the way, this is a free webinar. It's something that we're offering to the public for free. You can ask your questions live, and we can go through some of your questions, whether it's for yourself or for your clients, to be able to help address some of these issues and talk about it, right? So it's going to be practical, it's understandable, and it should be really engaging and fun. So
I'm really glad you said you don't need a neuroscience degree, because a lot of people shy away, like neuroscience, oh my God, over my head. But no, Hayley will be breaking this down. As Hayley mentioned, when we started, she and I met at a networking event, and I decided to bring her in to my group client community as a guest speaker, because Hayley does do guest spots. My client group is called the Intuitive Nutrition Circle. It's a wonderful group of women who are learning to heal their relationship with food, their bodies, with intuitive eating concepts, with nutrition concepts, etc. And it's not, my style is not do this, don't do that. No, my clients really want to understand what is happening. They need to understand. Once they understand, they're more likely to follow through on suggestions and recommendations and guidelines. And that is why I reached out to Hayley and said, can you come be a guest speaker in my group? And because we think this is so valuable and so many people can benefit, we decided to open this up to the community, to the public, so that you are being invited to that. The link is in the comment section to register. If you have any questions for either Hayley or me, please reach out to us in the DMs on LinkedIn. And if you have any questions, and we'll go through the comments after this to see if there's any comments there that we were not able to see, or if you're on replay, post questions, comments, we will, and tag us. We will absolutely be back. All right. We hope to see you on Wednesday, the 25th. Thank you, Hayley, for your time. I appreciate it. This was wonderful, and hope to see many of you on our webinar, March 25th.
Yes. Thank you all so much. Hope to see you soon.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.